Welcome to this week's edition of World Crisis Radio. The world situation continues to deteriorate. It is July 1914. The big news of the past 24 hours, an ultimatum issued by China against the United States: don't attack Pakistan or you will face retaliation from China. This is the first time in recent decades, the first time I can remember anybody issuing an ultimatum against the United States. We could, of course, go back to last week and reinterpret the Gilani speech about full force retaliation as an ultimatum in its own way. Now taken together, these two statements unquestionably constitute ultimata. This is the kind of language we heard in July 1914. This is the kind of language we heard in late August 1939. When the great powers begin to issue ultimata, one against the other, this is a sign of extreme, acute danger of general war. That is what we now have. It has been created by the Anglo-American imperialist madmen and their quest for confrontation with Pakistan, leading to a breakup of that country. They wish to destroy Pakistan as the leading strategic ally of China, and this has now been fully recognized in Beijing. But let's get to the number one story. This now comes from the Times of India, the section known as the Economic Times, and it's an article dateline Beijing and Islamabad, China, on Thursday. That would be the China doing this on the 19th of May. On Thursday said the international community must respect, that's a quote, must respect Pakistan's sovereignty and territorial integrity. This is the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Jiang Yu telling the media at the press conference that, quote, the sovereignty and territorial integrity of China must be respected. She goes on to say, all quotes, we believe that Pakistan has made great contributions to international counterterrorism efforts as well as huge sacrifices. The international community should understand and support Pakistan's effort to restore national stability and develop its economy. We have Prime Minister Gilani of Pakistan in Beijing. We'll have more on that visit in a minute. But Gilani tells Pakistan that he met with Premier Wen Jiabao, and the Gilani quote is, China supports Pakistan on its own. I think it means as its own, that China is as committed to Pakistan as it is to itself. In other words, it's a complete alliance. Gilani says, quote, there should be no harm to the Pakistani sovereignty, and the U.S. should understand and appreciate it. But now here's the heart of the matter. The news of Pakistan quotes Chinese diplomatic sources, and the Chinese diplomatic sources say, quote, this is, China has, quote, warned in unequivocal terms that any attack on Pakistan would be construed as an attack on China. Let me repeat that. China has warned the United States, quote, warned in unequivocal terms that any attack on Pakistan would be construed as an attack on China, end quote, say diplomatic sources to the news of Pakistan. And this warning, according to this article in the Times of India, the warning was formally conveyed by the Chinese foreign minister at last week's China-U.S. strategic dialogue and economic talks in Washington. That's an ultimatum. The last explicit ultimatum of the great powers that I can recall is 1956. Nikita Sergeyevich Khrushchev, during the Suez Crisis, issued an ultimatum to Britain and France: stop attacking Egypt or you will be hit by Soviet nuclear-armed IRBMs and SLBMs, that is, short-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles. The Soviet Union, to my knowledge, never issued any ultimatum against the United States, never. It looks to me like China has now delivered an ultimatum behind closed doors, but that's, of course, how it works. That's how it worked in July 1914. All the stuff became became public later on. Those were telegraph messages, not public speeches. So again, China warned in unequivocal terms that any attack on Pakistan would be construed as an attack on China, says the News of Pakistan, quoting diplomatic sources in Beijing, and I'm looking at an article in the Times of India. That is a very big deal. That is a world historical turning point. Now, that goes together with the Gilani speech of several days before, that is to say, the Gilani speech of, let's see, earlier in May 11th, we have Gilani with his famous reference to full force retaliation. Let's just go back and rehearse that one, because that now emerges in retrospect as a key ultimatum as well. This is Monday, the 11th of May. Gilani talking to the Pakistani parliament, and I quote, "Let no one draw any wrong conclusions. Any attack against Pakistan's strategic assets, whether overt or covert, will find a matching response. Pakistan reserves the right to retaliate with full force. No one should underestimate the resolve and capacity of our nation and armed forces to defend our sacred homeland." That's also pretty explicit. Full force retaliation. Now, the strategic assets in question are, of course, the Pakistani nuclear forces. We have referred here over the weeks to the McChrystal Plan, drawn up by General Stanley McChrystal at the Joint Special Operations Command, Fort Bragg. This is called Task Force Orange. Task Force Orange is tasked with seizing the Pakistani nuclear forces, seizing them, disable them, concentrating them, stealing them, getting them out of the country. These are located in various Pakistani air bases, and the goal is to go after them. And that, of course, is casus belli, as we have now heard. So the entire thing, the tension, the growing tension since the May 1st Osama bin Laden stunt, circus, psyop, whatever you want to call it, is based on the idea that kind of a deployment by the Joint Special Operations Command, and indeed by components of Task Force Orange, the so-called SEALs or whoever these people were, this is precisely the kind of thing that would represent the attack on the Pakistani nuclear forces. That is why the tensions are so high. Now, let's see what the United States has said in the face of these two ultimata. The ultimatum from Gilani on May 11th. Actually, this had really, we should go back. This had been preceded by a very stern warning from General Kayani, which had taken place earlier, which was couched in similar terms. This was on the 6th of May, General Kayani's statement that any repetition of unauthorized raids would cause the entire U.S.-Pakistan relation to be reevaluated. That's also going on. But now we have the new U.S. regional envoy, the one who's responsible for the Pakistan-Afghanistan portfolio. This is now Mark Grossman. And Mark Grossman has been asked by a number of Pakistani media, will you give us guarantees that there will be no repetition of these unilateral raids? Now, the average listener, the average reader thinks this refers to the bin Laden stuff. This is simply superficial. It refers to the nuclear forces, and the answer from Grossman is no. No assurances will be given. In effect, the U.S. rejects the ultimatum. We're in July 1914. We're in August 1939. Watch out, world. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to World Crisis Radio, repeating the main story. Chinese ultimatum to the United States issued in Beijing, May 19th. Any attack on Pakistan will be construed as an attack on China. The United States must respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of China. Don't try to break up the country. Don't try to raid it. Now, that means the U.S. is looking down the barrel of a couple of hundred nukes in Pakistan and the hydrogen bomb-equipped ICBMs, the Long March missiles of China. And take a fresh look at those, because those are quite serious. The U.S., as far as we know, has no way of stopping them. This is now an open-ended crisis. This is getting very serious, very fast. Time to wake up. We're in July 1914. We're in August 1939. And it's time to mobilize on this stuff. How to mobilize? Well, a tweet that I issued, I put out a tweet on Twitter on this last night when the analysis gelled. That has now been retweeted by 26 other tweeters, and that became the top tweet on the Pakistan page for quite a while last night. That's what you can do. Go to my Twitter feed, retweet what you find. Make me the top tweet across Twitter. We can turn the enemy's social communications into an instrument of mobilizing people to oppose this war. So the story is that now we're reading in the London Daily Express some days ago. Sorry, the London Sunday Express. The London Sunday Express of this past Sunday. U.S. troops will be deployed in Pakistan if the nation's nuclear installations come under threat from terrorists out to avenge the killing of Osama bin Laden, the Sunday Express can reveal. The plan would be activated without President Zardari's consent. It has provoked an angry reaction from Pakistani officials last Saturday, week ago tomorrow, as I'm taping. Obama would order troops to parachute in to protect key nuclear missile sites. These include the Air Force's Central Sargodha, S-A-R-G-O-D-H-A, headquarters, the home for nuclear-capable F-16 combat aircraft and at least 80 ballistic missiles. U.S. source tells the Sunday Express the plan is green-lighted, and Obama has already shown that he is willing to deploy troops in Pakistan. And the Pakistani officials all respond with anger. Pakistan has an elaborate command and control structure, fully capable of defending its own strategic assets. Under no circumstances would we need anything. So this falls under the heading of full force retaliation. That means launching those 80 nukes in the extreme case. And the Chinese warning, that will be construed as an attack on China. The last time you've heard such language is actually the Kennedy-Cuban Missile Crisis speech, where he says, it shall be the policy of the United States that any attack by a nuclear missile launched from Cuba on any country in the Western Hemisphere shall be interpreted as a Soviet attack on the United States, requiring a full U.S. retaliatory strike against the Soviet Union. Now, you're now in a pre-war. Pakistan is sending out the obvious warnings. Now, Grossman, he's supposed to be Mr. Reconciliation. This is the character who replaced the now dead Holbrooke. So Grossman is now making his first big visit to the area, I believe. Grossman refuses to rule out any more unilateral raids. And again, to a Pakistani, that means to seize the nukes that are the main deterrent against India. Grossman also says that he will not negotiate anything about the drones, the hated Predator drone attacks. Let's just look at those for a minute. We've had a joint session of the Pakistani parliament, and that joint session of both houses has made a unanimous vote saying, stop the Predator drone attacks or we will cut your supply line. We will cut the Karachi to Khyber supply line, which represents 2/3, 70% of the supplies that are going for the invading force in Afghanistan. We've had Senator Kerry, the rich oligarchical elitist degenerate, cavorting around in Pakistan. But the Grossman one is the one. Gilani, for his part, has been not so much oriented towards the U.S., but orienting towards China. And his speech is essentially that China is the best friend of Pakistan. China is Pakistan's best friend. The Chinese are